I have watched countless souls stand before this tribunal believing they lost because they refused to chase the people who walked away from them. They arrive carrying the same invisible sentence across their shoulders, convinced that silence was surrender, convinced that turning around instead of running after someone was proof they did not love enough, fight enough, or matter enough. Sit with this before another word is spoken. The record has already been examined. Every conversation, every unanswered message, every sleepless night, every moment you stood staring at a phone that never rang back has been entered into the ledger. The verdict is no longer waiting to be decided. It has already been written. You never lost them because you stopped chasing. You passed the trial the moment you did. I wish I could tell you that realizing this will erase every ache you've carried. I wish I could promise that once these words settle into your heart, every memory will suddenly become lighter, every scar will vanish, and every question that has haunted your quietest nights will simply disappear. But this tribunal does not trade in comforting illusions. It deals only in truth. And truth has an unusual way of hurting before it heals. That is why I need you to remain here for a little longer, because what you are about to understand will dismantle a belief that has been quietly controlling your life for far longer than you realize. You still remember the moment everything changed. Not because it was loud, because it was painfully ordinary. It may have been a message they ignored for days, a conversation where you found yourself explaining your heart for the 100th time, while the other person looked at you as though your feelings were an inconvenience. Perhaps it was another family gathering where your presence felt tolerated instead of welcomed. Perhaps it was the realization that every invitation, every apology, every attempt to repair what was broken somehow always began with you. You remember the exhaustion more than the argument. You remember the silence after you stopped talking. You remember waiting for someone else to reach across the distance for once. Waiting for someone else to notice the bridge had been collapsing for years. Waiting for proof that the relationship mattered enough for them to carry even a fraction of the weight you had been dragging alone. That proof never came. Instead, something stranger happened. Nothing. Days passed, then weeks, perhaps even months. The world did not end with a dramatic confrontation. There was no final confession, no breathtaking speech, no moment where they suddenly realized what they were losing and came running back with tears in their eyes. The ending arrived so quietly that your heart struggled to accept it had already happened. You kept expecting another chapter because surely this could not be the conclusion. Surely people who once claimed to love you would notice your absence. So you waited longer. And while you waited, you placed yourself on trial. You questioned every decision you had ever made. You replayed old conversations until the words blurred together. You searched your memory like an investigator, desperate to uncover the exact mistake that caused the collapse. Maybe I was too emotional. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. 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 That is what pain does. It appoints you as both the accused and the judge. It convinces you to build a courtroom inside your own mind, where every memory becomes another witness against you, and every regret becomes another piece of evidence supporting a sentence you were never meant to carry. The tragedy is not that you questioned yourself. The tragedy is that no one questioned the burden you had been carrying all along. No one stopped to ask why you were always the one rebuilding what someone else kept breaking. No one asked why your love was measured by how much you could endure. No one asked why your loyalty required you to become smaller every single year just to preserve a peace that never truly existed. The tribunal asked, and the answer changed everything, because the moment the record was examined without guilt, without fear, and without the desperate need to protect the people who wounded you, one undeniable truth emerged from every page. You were never chasing love, you were chasing permission. Permission to be accepted, permission to be understood, permission to finally feel like you belonged in places where belonging always came with conditions. That is the deception no one warned you about. When affection is conditional long enough, your heart slowly forgets what unconditional peace feels like. You stop asking whether someone loves you well, and you begin asking how much more of yourself you must sacrifice to finally deserve the love they keep placing just beyond your reach. And without realizing it, you stop living, you start performing. The performance did not begin all at once. It never does. No one wakes up one morning and decides to trade their identity for someone else's approval. It happens quietly, almost invisibly, through thousands of moments so ordinary that they hardly seem worth remembering. One apology you never should have made. One dream you kept to yourself because you already knew how they would react. One opinion you swallowed before it reached your lips. One boundary you erased because keeping the peace felt easier than defending your own heart. That is how invisible prisons are built. Not with walls, with habits, with expectations. With the silent agreement that your value will always depend on how useful you are to someone else's comfort. Every time you ignored your own pain to make another person feel secure, another stone was added to the prison. Every time you accepted blame simply because arguing had become too exhausting, another lock clicked into place. Every time you convinced yourself that love required constant sacrifice, another bar rose around your spirit. Eventually, you stopped noticing the prison altogether. You simply called it life. Hear the ruling. The tribunal has reviewed thousands of records. Different names, different faces, different families, different friendships, different relationships. Yet the same pattern appears so often that it no longer surprises me. The one who carries the emotional weight is almost always the one who believes they are the problem. Think about that. The person losing sleep over whether they hurt someone. The person replaying every conversation. The person desperately trying to understand everyone else's perspective. The person willing to apologize, learn, grow, and change. That person usually believes they are guilty. Meanwhile, those who demanded the burden rarely question themselves at all. Not because they are evil, because certainty is comfortable. Self-examination is not. It is easier to rewrite the story than rewrite yourself. So they tell themselves that you changed, that success made you arrogant, that healing made you distant, that boundaries made you selfish, that silence made you cold. Those stories protect something far more valuable to them than the relationship itself, their reflection. Because if they ever admitted the truth, if they ever acknowledged that you spent years carrying responsibilities that should have belonged to everyone, if they admitted that your silence came after endless attempts to be heard, if they accepted that you walked away only after every peaceful road had already been traveled, then the entire story they tell themselves would collapse. And that is a sentence many people spend their whole lives avoiding. This is why I need you to stop asking the question that has haunted you. Why didn't they fight for me? The ledger asks a different question. Why did they always expect you to be the one fighting? There is a profound difference between those two questions. The first keeps you trapped in grief. The second unlocks the courtroom. Because once you ask why the responsibility always belonged to you, something remarkable begins to happen. The illusion starts to crack. You begin remembering things you once ignored. How every difficult conversation somehow ended with you apologizing. How every disagreement became your responsibility to repair. How every season of distance required your effort to close. How your kindness slowly became an expectation instead of a gift. You were not loved because you sacrificed. You were expected to sacrifice because you loved. That expectation became so normal that you mistook it for intimacy. It wasn't intimacy. It was imbalance. Real love does not require one person to carry the entire bridge. Real love does not measure devotion by exhaustion. Real love does not wait for one heart to collapse before offering help. It walks beside you. It reaches toward you. It notices when you're tired before you have to explain why. But the people who benefited from your constant pursuit never learned that language. They learned a different one. A language where your silence meant they had won. Where your apology confirmed they were right. Where your return guaranteed they would never have to confront themselves. Then something happened they never expected. You became quiet. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. For the first time, you allowed the distance to remain exactly where they had created it. You stopped running across bridges that only existed because you kept rebuilding them. You stood still, and in that stillness, the trial truly began. Most people think the trial begins the moment someone betrays you. They're wrong. Betrayal is only the accusation. The real trial begins after the silence. It begins when no one calls, when no apology arrives. When birthdays pass without the messages you secretly hoped would appear. When holidays become quieter than you've ever known. When your fingers hover over the screen, your heart races, and one simple thought refuses to leave you alone. Maybe I should be the one to reach out. That is the courtroom. Not because the phone matters, because the next decision determines who will continue carrying the sentence. You cannot imagine how many people return to the prison at that exact moment. Not because they are weak, because loneliness is persuasive. Loneliness speaks with the voice of memory. It reminds you of the few beautiful moments while quietly hiding the years that came before them. It tells you about the laughter but forgets the tears. It shows you the rare embrace while concealing the countless nights you questioned your own worth. Pain has a remarkable talent. It edits history. It removes the evidence that would have set you free. That is why the tribunal never relies on feelings alone. Feelings are real, but they are not always complete. The ledger remembers what grief tries to erase. It remembers how many times your heart left conversations feeling smaller than when they began. It remembers every promise that quietly dissolved into another disappointment. It remembers the endless cycle that became so familiar, you almost accepted it as normal. Everything would be calm for a while. Then something would happen. You would express a need, set a boundary, tell the truth, or simply ask to be treated with the same care you freely gave everyone else. Suddenly the atmosphere would change. The warmth disappeared. The distance returned. You found yourself explaining emotions that should never have required a defense. You apologized for your tone instead of being heard for your pain. And before you even realized it, you were once again carrying the emotional weight of a conflict you never created. The cycle repeated so many times that your soul began preparing for it before it even happened. You walked into conversations already rehearsing apologies. You entered family gatherings already bracing for disappointment. You lowered your expectations so often that disappointment eventually became easier to recognize than joy. That is not peace. That is survival. There is a difference. Peace allows your shoulders to relax. Survival teaches them to remain tense, even when the danger has already passed. Have you noticed how difficult it has become to trust kindness? How compliments sometimes make you suspicious? How genuine affection feels almost unfamiliar? That did not happen because your heart became cold. It happened because your heart learned to expect conditions attached to every expression of love. Somewhere along the way, acceptance became a transaction. You believed you had to earn rest, earn understanding, earn patience, earn forgiveness, earn belonging. But the tribunal rejects every one of those conditions. Belonging was never supposed to be something purchased through suffering. Love was never meant to feel like an examination you could fail at any moment. Yet that was the world you slowly adapted to. A world where every mistake felt catastrophic because you feared it might become another reason to be abandoned. So you became careful. You measured every word. You softened every opinion. You smiled through disappointments. You swallowed grief before anyone else had to witness it. Not because pretending felt good, because pretending felt necessary. And that is what breaks my heart. Not that they misunderstood you, that you slowly began misunderstanding yourself. You started believing your gentleness was weakness. Your compassion was neediness. Your honesty was inconvenience. Your sensitivity was something to apologize for. None of those things were ever your crime. They were simply qualities that could not survive inside a room where authenticity threatened the stories everyone else depended upon. The warden has seen this before. The soul that refuses to become cruel is often mistaken for the soul that can endure anything, so people keep placing more weight upon it, until one day, the soul quietly sets the burden down, not in anger, not in revenge, simply because it finally remembers. It was never theirs to carry. The moment you set that burden down, something happened that you probably never noticed. Nothing changed on the outside. The same streets were still there. The same names still existed in your phone. The same house, the same memories, the same empty chair at the table. Everything appeared exactly as it had the day before. But inside you, an entire kingdom shifted. For years, your heart had been operating under one unspoken law. If I love harder, they'll finally understand. That law governed everything. It determined how long you stayed after being hurt, how many chances you offered after trust had already been broken, how often you excused behavior that would have devastated someone you loved if it had happened to them. You became generous beyond reason, patient beyond health, forgiving beyond wisdom, not because you lacked strength, because your heart could not accept that some people would rather lose you than lose control over the version of you they had grown comfortable with. That realization is devastating, not because it fills you with hatred, because it empties you of illusion. There is a grief unlike any other. It is not the grief of losing a person. It is the grief of losing the future you imagined with them. You mourn conversations that will never happen, apologies that will never arrive, birthdays that will never feel the same. The embrace you waited your whole life to receive. You grieve the possibility more than the reality. And possibility is difficult to bury, because hope keeps breathing long after evidence has stopped speaking. That is why you kept looking back. Not because you wanted to return to the pain, because you were searching for proof that the story could still end differently. The tribunal understands that. Hope is not a weakness. Hope is one of the strongest forces in the human soul. It keeps people alive. It teaches them to endure winters they never believed they could survive. But hope has a shadow. When it attaches itself to people who repeatedly choose not to change, it quietly transforms into captivity. You stop hoping for healing. You begin postponing your own. Every year becomes another year of waiting, another year of explaining, another year of carrying responsibilities that were never assigned to you by truth, only by expectation. That is the sentence the tribunal overturns today. You are no longer responsible for convincing someone to value what they repeatedly overlooked. You are no longer responsible for teaching another person the language of empathy. You are no longer responsible for translating your worth into words simple enough for people committed to misunderstanding you. The verdict has already been entered. You are released, not because they finally admitted what they did, because your freedom was never dependent upon their confession. Think about that. How many years have you delayed your own peace while waiting for someone else to become honest? How many nights have you imagined the perfect conversation? The one where they finally look into your eyes and say, "You were right. I hurt you. I see it now." You dreamed of that moment because you believed it would heal you. But healing built upon another person's awakening is always fragile. What happens if they never wake up? Do you remain imprisoned forever? Do you postpone your life until they become someone they have spent years refusing to become? The tribunal refuses such a sentence. Justice delayed by another person's denial is not justice at all. So the ledger offers something far greater. Permission to walk forward without the apology. Permission to heal without the explanation. Permission to build a future that is no longer waiting for yesterday to change. That permission terrifies people, because once you accept it, there is nothing left to chase. No final argument. No last message. No desperate attempt to make yourself understandable to someone determined not to understand. Only the quiet realization that your silence was never empty. It was the first honest conversation your soul had ever had with itself, and in that conversation, you finally chose you. Choosing yourself sounds beautiful when people say it. Living it is another matter entirely, because the first thing you discover after choosing yourself is not confidence, it is grief. A grief so quiet that no one around you notices it. You continue going to work, you answer messages, you smile when someone asks how you've been. You keep moving because life does not stop simply because your heart is rebuilding itself. Yet beneath every ordinary day, another story is unfolding. You are learning how to exist without constantly seeking permission. Permission to speak, permission to rest, permission to disagree, permission to become someone the people around you may never fully understand. That kind of freedom is unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things often feel frightening before they feel right. The first time you refuse to apologize for something that wasn't your fault, your heart races. The first time you allow someone else's disappointment to remain their responsibility instead of making it yours, you question yourself all night. The first time you choose silence instead of another exhausting explanation, guilt knocks on your door as though it still owns the house. But guilt is only a visitor. It is not your identity. For years it convinced you that every conflict required your intervention, every misunderstanding demanded your correction, every broken bridge became your assignment. So when you finally stepped back, guilt whispered the same lie it always had. If you really loved them, you would go back. The tribunal has heard that argument countless times. It has never once changed the verdict, because love is measured by truth, not by endless self-abandonment. There is a difference between reconciliation and surrender. Reconciliation requires two hearts willing to meet each other. Surrender asks only one heart to disappear. You spent too many years calling surrender by the wrong name. That is why your silence felt so unnatural. It interrupted a role you had been performing for so long that it almost became your identity. The peacemaker, the fixer, the one who always understood. The one who forgave before anyone apologized. The one who carried conversations no one else wanted to have. The one who quietly absorbed disappointment so everyone else could remain comfortable. But tell me something. Who carried you? When your heart broke, whose shoulder became your refuge? When you questioned your own worth, who stayed long enough to remind you of the truth? When you cried behind closed doors because another conversation had left you feeling invisible, who came searching for you? The silence answers those questions more honestly than words ever could. And that answer is painful, because it reveals that while you spent years protecting everyone else's peace, very few people ever protected yours. That realization is not meant to fill you with resentment. It is meant to awaken discernment. There is a profound difference. Resentment chains you to the past. Discernment teaches you how to protect the future. One keeps staring at the closed door. The other quietly walks toward an open one. This is why your silence became their prison. Not because they suddenly missed your voice, because they no longer had access to the version of you that made carrying responsibility optional. The weight returned to its rightful owners. The emotional labor you silently performed for years could no longer be outsourced to your compassion. The stories they told themselves could no longer be maintained by your willingness to keep returning. Reality has an extraordinary patience. It waits, it never argues, it never shouts, it simply remains. And sooner or later, every person must stand alone before the consequences of the choices they repeatedly made. That is not revenge. That is judgment written into the fabric of truth itself. You did not create that judgment. You simply stepped out of the way long enough for it to arrive. That is the part no one prepares you for. You spend so many years believing that walking away will make you feel powerful, only to discover that real freedom arrives wearing the clothes of uncertainty. There are mornings when you wake up and instinctively reach for a version of your life that no longer exists. There are moments when a familiar song, an old photograph, or the scent of a place you once called home catches you completely off guard. For a heartbeat, you forget everything that brought you here. You remember only the people you loved, and then the ledger quietly opens again. Not to accuse you, to remind you. It reminds you of the nights you begged for conversations that never happened. It reminds you of the countless times your heart left the room, carrying more questions than answers. It reminds you that your silence did not appear overnight. It was not born from pride. It was not fueled by revenge. It was shaped by years of being unheard, years of extending grace without receiving it, years of rebuilding bridges that someone else seemed determined to burn. That is why I refuse to let you confuse missing someone with belonging with them. Those are not the same thing. You can miss people who never truly knew how to love you. You can mourn relationships that were never healthy. You can ache for a place that was quietly breaking your spirit. The heart does not always grieve what was good. Sometimes it grieves what it desperately hoped would become good. That hope deserves compassion, but it does not deserve control over your future. Hear this verdict carefully. You are not responsible for returning to places that repeatedly required you to abandon yourself. You are not responsible for convincing people to recognize your worth after they repeatedly chose convenience over connection. You are not responsible for proving that your heart was genuine to people who only acknowledged your love when it benefited them. The tribunal has already weighed the evidence. The ruling stands. You are cleared. Not because you lived perfectly, not because you never made mistakes, but because your mistakes were never the reason the relationship collapsed. The burden you carried was never proportionate to the responsibility you actually held. That is what finally became undeniable. The scales were never balanced. Every disagreement asked more from you. Every reconciliation depended more on you. Every sacrifice cost more of you. For years you accepted that imbalance because you believed love demanded it. Now you know the truth. Love never asked for your identity. Control did. Love never asked you to shrink. Fear did. Love never required endless performances. Approval did. And once you recognize the difference, something extraordinary begins to happen inside you. You stop measuring your value by who stayed. You stop measuring your worth by who understood. You stop measuring your future by who chose to walk away. Instead, you begin measuring your life by something infinitely more honest. Peace. Not the fragile peace built on silence and self-denial. Real peace. The kind that lets you breathe without rehearsing tomorrow's conversation. The kind that allows your shoulders to relax because they are no longer carrying responsibilities assigned by guilt. The kind that no longer asks you to earn the right to exist exactly as you are. That peace is not waiting somewhere in the distance. It began the moment you stopped chasing. You simply could not hear it over the noise of grief. Now you can. Listen closely. Do you hear it? It is quiet, steady, unshaken. It is the sound of a soul that no longer stands before an unjust tribunal, begging for another chance to prove its innocence. It is the sound of someone who finally understands that the verdict was never written by the people who rejected them. It was written the moment they refused to betray themselves again. So walk forward without guilt. Walk forward without the weight of unfinished conversations. Walk forward without waiting for an apology that may never come. The ledger is closed. The sentence has been lifted. Your silence was never your punishment. It was your release. And those who demanded that you keep chasing will spend far longer confronting the echo you left behind than you will ever spend looking back at the door you had the courage to leave.